Well, it's been quite some time since the last CLV Boost video that I've been able to create myself here. As many of you know, I finally sold my first e-commerce business called Science of Skill about 6 months ago or so at the time of this recording. Um, a lot of the lessons that we've taught here at CLV Boost have been things that I've learned the hard way growing an e-commerce business. And now I know some lessons on getting to multiple millions in top line revenue and also being able to get a seven-figure exit. So how do you get somebody to buy your company for $1 million or more when it's ready to sell? And over the last 4 years, we were able to get Science of Skill up to that level. We were fortunate enough to get into the Inc. 5000. We were 536, $2 million in revenue, get some cool coverage in places like Forbes and Business Insider and other publications. And now I am free to move on to artificial intelligence and to some of the bigger ventures that I was really excited to embark on because the cash is freed up and the business is now sold. So this video is going to be a what I wish I knew video. So what I desperately wish somebody would have sat me down and told me before I set out to build a company that I was intending to sell for $1 million. What did I need to know beforehand in order to make that go down? And I thought about this for quite some time. In fact, I took a walk here today in San Francisco, and the whole purpose of that walk was to shake out the top 3 ideas and how to distill them all into a single concept. So I want to break down the 3 ideas: picking the right market, mastering teamwork, and mastering your traffic. When I say these are the biggest ideas, these were the biggest ones for me. You'll have your own personal journey with growing a business. You may run into issues that maybe I don't even address here. You may have your own things that kind of come up personally. These are ones that I just know for me personally were things that I should have or wish I could have known and understood on day one as opposed to learning them over the course of 4 years the hard way. But now that I have learned some of them and have taken home some of those major lessons, I can say that these were all mission critical in order to get our company past the $2 million mark. And to the point where it was able to be acquired. So without further ado, we'll go into the first one, which is picking the right market. When I say picking the right market, the first constituent here is that you have to pick something that's going to be big enough. So what are your goals? Now, if your objective is, hey, I'd like to get to $20,000 a month and I'd like it to be less than 40 hours a week of work, and I'd like to enjoy doing it. If that's your objective, then you have a lot less constraints around the market that you pick. However, if you'd like the option to grow to a couple $1,000,000, and generally when you hit a certain level, right, you hit 20,000, there's a part of you that wants to grow. If you know you're the kind of person who's explicitly looking for a more lifestyle kind of a business, then maybe that won't apply to you. But oftentimes people do want to be able to see growth, and not all markets can allow for that. So when Science of Skill began, it was in the very small martial arts niche that I was teaching in called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The first business I ever started and sold was an MMA kind of fighting academy in my hometown in Wakefield, Rhode Island. And as it turns out, that market actually wasn't that big. We weren't really able to get Science of Skill up to the point where we could realistically sell it for 7 figures in that very small, very niche market. So what are your own personal goals? How much would you like to make per month? How much would you ultimately like to sell the business for if you're able to ever get an exit? What are your own kind of life and business goals? And ensure that you pick a market that's going to match that. There's really, really large, fields for, e-commerce or for digital instruction like we did with Science of Skill, or for consultative work where you have a borderline unlimited market size and you could grow to be a very, very large company, many tens of millions of dollars, many hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. There's other markets that are inevitably much smaller, much more niche. Some of them so niche that it would be challenging to sustainably grow a business to a certain size. So think about the overlap between your interests and between the actual ability for the market to pay. So if you have an interest in gardening, in some very specific sub-niche of gardening, like desert gardening for people in Arizona or arid climates that want to grow pineapples or something. This may be prohibitively small if you want to grow a business that will put your children through college. However, if you can find a way to broaden the circle to sort of expand the circle out to a market that would encompass a bit more, you may be able to then take still what is your passion, still what is your focus, your expertise, and grow it into a business that's substantial. For us, we took Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and expanded it out to self-defense. So you have your interest, you have the market, you have to have enough overlap here to really make a sustainable, large enough business. And that's something you should think about initially, not later on. If you're sort of before the point of starting a company, this is something you'll want to consider now before you start naming it and buying a URL and the rest of that. Okay, mastering teamwork. Man, this took me longer to learn than I'm proud to admit. Off the bat, in the early days of a business, things will be hodgepodge and all over the place. And the people who are working with you, just like you, won't exactly know what are all the gears we need to turn, what are all the things we need to do to make this business sustainable and turn it into something we can really be proud of. And that'll actually be kind of a challenging question to answer. It'll be tough to tell what those tasks are. But once you do calibrate and figure out, okay, these are the activities we need to do for content. Okay, these are the activities we need to do for marketing. Okay, these are the activities we need to do for sales or for IT or support or whatever the case may be. The absolute goal, sooner rather than later, and this is always a challenge early, and so long as you understand it's a challenge, that's fine. But to see this as a first objective with your team is a big deal, and something that I definitely had to learn the hard way. The goal is to eventually align team members with tasks that they enjoy and excel in. So to be able to determine and discern a process, a system, a deliverable, something coherently important for the business, and to put someone in that role who's going to love it, excel at it, and kick butt at it, that's actually a pretty challenging game to play. But when you know that it's your objective, then as soon as you find those working systems, and in every business that'll be different. I know some of you listening in are going to be e-commerce, some people consulting, some people what have you. There's always going to be different varieties. The goal is to line up the folks on your team with those tasks. If we go to the team that I had here at Science of Skill, this isn't everybody, but if we just talk about some of these guys, these are my boys here. These guys helped me build the business. Dylan is not in this picture, but Dylan was another really important team member. This is Tim. Tim was my first employee in this business. Buddy of mine, martial arts training partner of mine, just great guy, and Tim slogged it out with me in the really, really early days. And Tim and I both did everything in the early days, like just running around scrambling like a bunch of, crazed chickens with their heads cut off. And eventually, we got to the point where we got to settle into sweet spots when we realized how important that was. Tim liked to put his head down and liked to nail the numbers, calculate the ROI, calibrate the offer, and, run the advertising. Kind of heads down type stuff. Heads down with copywriting, heads down with number crunching, heads down with strategy for hitting the next round of numbers. Just really focusing on those deliverables. He liked to see growth, he liked to see monetary return, and he didn't necessarily want to be in 100 meetings. Marcus wanted to be in 1,000 meetings. He wanted to run everything with everybody. The web designers, the developers. He had an opinion about everything, which luckily, 2 years working with the business, he actually had a pretty good ideas for almost all the areas of the business. And actively liked being the social glue and the energizer of the team, and he very much was. Marcus's sense of humor kind of became the sense of humor of the company in some respects, because he's just such an exuberant fella. And so that seriously rubbed off, and we found a way to take him out of heads-down copywriting and put him more into team management for customer service, for the developers, for our content creators, and that's where he really shines. And people loved him in those roles. He loved being in those roles, and we found out what clicked. The last about 18 months of growing this business before we sold was really dialing that in, and I could go into that for the rest of the team, but I won't bore you here. And then come up with a quarterly, weekly, and daily sort of meeting regimen to keep everybody on the same page, and as well as vision-related KPIs, so key progress indicators. Everybody on our team that you just saw in that picture and more had a handful of numbers that they were responsible for every week. For customer support, it was what's the ticket time for a customer support reply, and what's the satisfaction rate. For Timothy in advertising, it was what did we spend on advertising and what did we make on advertising, and what's our estimated lifetime value, after 12 months of the new customers we acquired. Are we better than break even or worse than break even? Every single week we look at those numbers. Calibrated KPIs. The best book for learning these latter two is a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. Arguably the best business book I've ever read. I probably talk about it too much, but it's a super excellent book, and probably 80% of my consulting clients at CLV Boost over the years have gotten a copy of that book either from me or I've talked about it so much that they just bought it. So mastering KPIs that tie to those tasks that they excel in and enjoy, and also nailing a quarterly, weekly, and daily meeting regimen is extremely important. Scaling Up is the book to read. The weekly regimen is where we talk about the metrics and numbers, and that's very, very important. The key concept here is being on the same page and having a clear line of sight. Does everybody know exactly what they are driving forward and delivering on? That's these little arrows here, if you can't tell from my amazing artistic skills. And is everybody on the same page? Do we all know the common vision? Do we all know the common goal? Do we all know the common objective that we are all shooting for? If the answer is yes to both, we know the common mission, the quarterly objectives, the annual objectives, whether that be for revenue or how we want to change the business model or deliver value in the market. That's this common ground that we're all standing on. We all know that's what we're working towards. That's what we're building together. And then we all know exactly how we're building that. This takes time to calibrate. It's fine if this is hodgepodge and a little scary in the early days, but as you drive forward and tinker with it and discover what works in your business, you'll be able to match people to the right tasks.